but going into this topic, the first study that we're posting tonight actually talks about hunger. So how many of you guys who are watching this have dieted, right? Hard, like really hard. I know, I mean, I've dieted real hard before. And being into bodybuilding, all of us have at some point in time probably crash dieted, like done diets that were not probably the best thing to do. And so one study by Sumitran that we're posting later today came and they showed people basically, they dieted down and they basically went to lower than 1,000 calories a day. So they're eating like 500 to 800 calories a day for 8 weeks, okay? So a crash diet for 8 weeks. They lost a lot of weight, like more than 10% of their body weight, okay? But then they went and put them back on normal calories. And they looked at their hunger. Immediately after the diet, it was way higher. And listen to this. They looked at them 1 year later. So 1 year later after crash dieting, and guess what? They were still hungrier. Like they were still hungrier. So literally a year after crash dieting, after having less than 1,000 calories for only 8 weeks, a year later they were hungrier. And guess what? Their hunger hormones were higher. And one of the main hunger hormones that we look at is called ghrelin. And their main hunger hormones were higher. Think about that for a second, right? So a year later, their hunger was higher after crash dieting and their hunger hormones were higher. So this hunger thing doesn't just affect us during a diet, it could affect us for a year or more after the diet, right? So that's funny, Mike. So anyway, you get what I'm saying. So anyway, how do we counter this? Well, one of the things we looked at with Muscle PhD this week was, can fats make you more satiated? So we showed a study on Monday where basically, or actually it was yesterday, where they had a high carb meal or a meal with a lot more fat in it, and higher fat made you far more satiated. Okay, so basically like more like, for example, if you were to consume bacon and eggs versus like, you know, cereal, you know, and whey, you'd be far more satiated with like the bacon and eggs. So the main point is that fat can be very satiating. So when you do a very low fat diet, one of the problems with that is you can be hungry all the time, okay? So that's real important for us to understand, is that what we really need to do is like that fat can be very satiating. Okay, so now speaking of fats, are there certain fats that are more satiating than others? Well, it turns out that there's a chain length to fats. So we have short chain fatty acids, which are like the name suggests, very short, like 4 carbons, 2 carbons. You have long chain fatty acids, which are like greater than 12 carbons. So you could have like 20 carbons. That's a long chain fatty acid. Then you have medium chain triglycerides or medium chain fats, okay? And that would be like, for example, 6 to 10 carbons, maybe 6 to 12 carbons, but 6 to 10 carbons are medium chain. Medium chains are really high in things like coconut oil, and they seem to make you more satiated than like even the long chains. But here's the interesting thing. Short chain fatty acids seem to have really high satiating effects. So there's, again, where do you get short chain fatty acids? Well, one of the things is short chain fatty acids, you'll recognize them by a very small, like kind of pungent, strong smell, okay? So if you have dairy like cheese, it kind of has like a pungent or like a strong smell. What would you call that, Andy? Like the smell?
Oh.
For like cheese, like a very strong smell.
I would say pungent is a good word.
Pungent smell, okay? So that is going to be, what's causing that smell oftentimes is butyrate. So butyrate is a very strong smell, and that's 4 carbons. There's another fat that's called acetate or acetic acid, and that's 2 carbons long, and that's in vinegar. And one of the studies we posted up actually got a huge response. On our Instagram had like 2,500 likes, like a couple hundred comments. We had over, a couple hundred shares on Facebook. Got a lot of press. Was this study we posted where just a couple tablespoons of vinegar a day See, vinegar, 30 mils of vinegar has about 1.5 grams of acetic acid. So acetic acid is a short chain fatty acid. What they found is just taking acetic acid made people lose fat. And other studies have shown that acetic acid makes you more satiated. So it's a short chain fatty acid, and also acetic acid may be ketogenic. It might increase ketones. It can convert to butyrate, and butyrate's highly satiating. But also these fatty acids turn off genes that make us want to store fat. Okay, so again, acetic acid, short chain fatty acid, makes us more satiated, turns off genes that make us store fat, and all you gotta do is take a couple tablespoons a day. I recommend apple cider vinegar. In fact, what I do sometimes, I take like water, put ice in it, apple cider vinegar, maybe and put like some Splenda in there, or stevia. Mix that up. It's actually pretty good tasting. Have it before your meals, you'll be more satiated, you lose fat. Now the last study we're going to post tomorrow is a really awesome study, and this study was by Sumitran. It actually recently came out, I think 2013. And we post it tomorrow. But remember when I told you how the less than 1,000 calories a day made you starving, and your hunger hormone skyrocketed? Now, if I told you right now, if you go on a 1,000-calorie diet, what are you going to be? You're going to be starving. You're going to be cranky. You're going to be mean. You're going to want to eat everything in sight. But they did a study with ketogenic dieting, under 1,000 calories. Guess what? Hunger didn't change. So in other words, we need a ketogenic diet that was really low calorie, hunger didn't change, and hunger hormones didn't go up. Like under 1,000 calories, hunger hormones did not go up. So there's something special about a ketogenic diet that stops you from being very hungry. Now, why is this the case? Well, basically, during a ketogenic diet, sometimes there's a couple things that make us hungry or full. One is, it's called like the nutrient stat theory. One is blood glucose. When blood glucose drops, we get hungry. On a ketogenic diet, surprisingly, blood glucose stays stable. You don't get drops. Also, fatty acids, if they go up, you don't get as hungry. Fatty acids are a little bit elevated on a ketogenic diet. But finally, ketones go up on a ketogenic diet. So if ketones are higher in a ketogenic diet, that's very satiating, okay? So basically it means that you can be very low calorie and not be super hungry. Now, there's a couple ways we could do this. One, if you've been dieting for a long time and you're super hungry, maybe just switch over to a ketogenic diet, you can control your hunger. Two, if you've been dieting for a long time, like you messed up, you're watching this, you crash dieted, you feel your back's against the wall, you're like, what do? I can't, I'm just starving all the time. I want to eat everything, maybe switch from a low-fat to a ketogenic diet because maybe you won't be as hungry. So coming off a contest, maybe switching to a ketogenic diet may be beneficial, okay? So, so that's kind of, let me summarize this up. Number one, if you go on a crash diet or if you diet really hard, you might be hungry for up to a year afterward, okay? Your hunger hormones will also be elevated. There are ways we can counter this. Higher fat meals, like for example, breakfast, a higher fat breakfast can make you more satiated, and that would be more like, for example, an omelet with feta cheese on it and spinach. It's going to make you fuller. Are there certain types of fat that make us more satiated? The answer is yes. Medium chain triglycerides that are like in coconut oil are going to be very good. Or you could have short chain fatty acids like in vinegar. You have acetic acid. It's very, very satiating and causes you to lose fat. But also butyrate, that things like in butter and cheese and cream is very high in short chain fatty acids and medium chain triglycerides. If you are starving because you've been dieting a long time, possibly switching over to a ketogenic diet may cut your hunger out, okay? And so that leads us into our questions. Matuz says, ketogenic diet adjusts ghrelin and leptin levels. Absolutely. Your ghrelin levels do not get as high. Craig Kent says, pioneering this. Yes, sir. So guys, want to take all your questions now and just shoot them your way. You guys want to ask, or we just?
You got it? I gotta go.
Yeah.
Go on. You good? In comparison to fiber, how much more satiating is actually fat?
That's a really good question. You know, here's the thing. I think that fiber is one of the most satiating. The reason why I would say fiber is more satiating is because it's really doesn't have a lot of calories compared to fat. So on a gram for gram basis, fiber is going to be more satiating, but also fiber kind of has like a bulking effect, so it has like a mechanical effect in your stomach, probably more so than fats. So fiber is going to probably be more satiating than fat, but fat can be very satiating, and the combination of the two is a really big way to kill hunger. That's why I said like the egg omelet with spinach, you know, because you have fiber as well. When cutting on a keto diet, should you refeed, and what should it be? I think that calorie cycling should be on any diet that you use. So there's a couple studies. One of the only first studies to be done in calorie cycling, they ate normal, and then they dieted for 10 days, and then they increased their calories for 3 days to kind of just what they wanted to eat, and they maintained their metabolisms. So my advice is like either like probably like calorie cycle, maybe have a low calorie day, moderate calorie day, normal calorie day when dieting, or 5 days low calories, weekends not. I don't recommend like a Cheesecake Factory binge, you know. Granted, I did do some of that when I was on vacation, but anyway, yes, I do recommend calorie cycling. Would combining MCTs with apple cider vinegar be a good remedy for hunger? Yes, that's Matt Christensen. Yes, it would be. Let's see. How should someone plan the amount of sodium to intake on a low carb, high fat approach? So when you go keto, insulin causes to retain more sodium. When you have low insulin, you excrete sodium at a much higher rate. So I wouldn't like weigh your sodium out, but I'd salt foods, have bacon, just have saltier foods on a ketogenic diet, and that'll prevent like the ketogenic flu. How much fat can one eat per day? Depends on the individual. I mean, basically, and it depends on your diet. So if you're on like a more of a higher carb diet, I'd probably keep your fat to probably no more than 20 to 30% of your diet. And depending on how many calories, like we had a guy prepping for the NFL Combine, at rest, his metabolism was like 3,300 calories. To gain mass, plus working out, so to gain mass, he can eat like 5,000 calories a day. That guy's gonna eat a couple 100 grams of fat probably. You take a guy like me, my rested metabolic rate is it's like 1,600 calories. So for me, you know, even on a ketogenic diet, I might only get like 180, 200 grams of fat. So it all depends on your metabolic state. If it's keto, it's going to be 75% of your diet. If you're not keto, probably 20 to 30%. Tori goes, why would my ketones drop after overnight fasting? Because Tori, when you wake up in the morning, cortisol is higher, and that converts protein over to glucose. So every time you measure ketones in the morning, they'll be lower. They get higher later in the day. You mentioned in a video that a big amount of muscle damage can temporarily trigger insulin resistance. Why is that? Well, think about it. The muscle, so insulin signaling is insulin goes to the muscle and talks to it. It's like, hey, muscle, take up carbohydrates. The more that communication works, the better off, the better insulin sensitivity is. But if you damage the muscle, now the receptors that can listen to insulin are damaged. So that's why you have insulin resistance. Does that make sense? Is that a good explanation? Is it essential to add, I don't know what someone's saying. Is it essential to add to a competition diet? I know this.
Add fats to a competition diet?
I think so. What's your opinion on wave loading training? I mean, I think that's a good, I'm assuming wave loading is more like, well, if it's like step loading, basically you start off with volume like moderate, and then you step it up, and you step it up and you drop down. So basically one of the periodized models, wave loading or step loading, you start off at a moderate volume, then you go up to, or a low volume, then you go moderate, then you go extreme volume, meaning high sets, heavy weight, and then when it gets really hard, you drop back down. I think that is a really good method to periodize your training. So if I go high volume all the time, eventually I'm going to stop making gains, and I can't recover. Remember, it's all about recovery. So low volume, moderate volume, high volume, and then drop the volume. Okay. So, you know, someone's really talking about their gallbladder and stuff like that. You know, if you lose your gallbladder keto, it's going to be a lot harder to do a ketogenic diet. You really, in that case, are probably going to go more like higher, you know, not as high a fat. But for you, if you want the benefits, Marianne, of a ketogenic diet, that's where supplemental ketones can come into play. So for you, I would recommend more of like supplemental ketones. How effective can bulking on a keto diet be? No one studied it. I think that you may prevent some fat gain. That's what I think when you do a keto diet. Do all muscles need the same volume? No. Different muscles, think about it like, for example, like your back's a lot bigger, a lot more muscles involved in your back. They're a lot larger than, say, your biceps. So your back might need 16 to up to 30 sets to fatigue out, whereas your biceps, you might be able to hit them hard with 8 sets, right? So take into account the muscle size that you have, and it's going to be one of the major determinants. Larger muscles might need, again, anywhere from 12 to 20 sets, whereas smaller muscle groups might need 6 to 12. What was this question by Hall? How do we interpret data showing that by Hall, showing similar body fat loss between keto and high carb diet? That's a good question. Basically, Hall's research was way too short on ketogenic dieting. 2 things on Hall's research. Number 1, it was way too short. So you're talking about like his studies lasted from like 2 to 4 weeks. You don't adapt to a ketogenic diet except like in 2 weeks. 2, it was too short. 3, it was in obese individuals who basically are metabolically inflexible. So it means it takes them longer to adapt to a ketogenic diet. So they actually can't use fat as well. So you wouldn't expect it to work as well for them for like the first week or 2. 4 or 5, I lost count, was that the diet was very low in protein. So it was like American Dietetic Association, you know, recommended protein. So my thing, basically, J. Lucas Nutrition, my answer is a poorly formulated ketogenic diet in a metabolically inflexible population that needs more time to adapt. That's how I explain it. Longer study, you would have seen the results. Okay, tips for vascularity. Good question. Supersets, giant sets, blood flow restriction training. All of that are key for getting vascularity. Glycerol before you train is going to be good. You know, focusing mainly on the pump is going to stimulate things like vascularization, capillarization. So really mind-blowing pumps. Leslie goes, in a 17-year-old boy doing powerlifting, should I up his carbs from 25 during competition season? He feels fine at 25, but I don't want him to lose muscle. Well, Leslie, is he losing muscle? I mean, I would say that, you know, more focus on his calories in general if he feels fine. You could try a targeted approach to keto, but remember, when you're ketogenic dieting, your muscle carb stores are already fine anyway. So, I want to lose weight. Do I eat lower than my maintenance level? Okay, Razor Innate Physique asked this question. Cool name. Basically, to answer your question, if you're going to lose weight, you likely need to be lower than maintenance calories. If you're trying to have body recomposition, you could be at maintenance calories and up your cardio, like your interval training, and up your supersets, your metabolic training, and you'll have body recomposition. You might not lose a lot of weight, but you'll lose fat. If that answers your question. It's a lot of questions. What's the proper dosage and timing for phosphatidic acid during a ketogenic diet? I would say 750 milligrams a day. I think is a good dose. We dose it in our studies about an hour before. 750 milligrams an hour before you train. If you train twice, 750 milligrams an hour before both of your training sessions. For you guys who don't know, phosphatidic acid basically is the fat trigger for muscle growth, and when you lift weights, it increases in your muscle. Taking phosphatidic acid which is high in like things like soy or in lecithin, seems to be beneficial for muscle growth. Opinion on supplementation for vascularity. Rabbit George asked this question. I think glycerol is going to be really good for vascularity. Citrulline will be really good for vascularity.
I would even say increasing water and sodium intake.
Water and sodium intake will be good for vascularity. Improving insulin sensitivity, because insulin drives a lot of the vascular response. So things like berberine, maybe like 500 milligrams to a gram a day of berberine will increase your insulin sensitivity. That will be good for vascularity. Carbohydrate cycling will be good for insulin sensitivity. Are you likely to convert protein to glucose if supplement it during training when cortisol is high? Yes. Cortisol will convert protein over to glucose, but if you're taking like BCAAs during your training, it's not that big a deal. Okay, let's see. What do you think about combining intermittent fasting and a ketogenic diet? I think it's awesome. Okay, let's see what we got here. Keto plus roller derby, high intensity, similar to hockey, multi-game weekend tournaments. Keto, okay. Yes, Kelly, it's great. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Any plans for Project Shred? Yes, we've got to do that in the new year at some point. We really have to do Project Shred at some point.
There's so much going on.
So, guys, there's so much going on. We're working on a book. We're actually working on something, Muscle PhD website. We're working on Generation Iron 2. We're shooting Generation Iron 2 at the end of this month. We are working on something that's going to blow your mind on Muscle PhD. Like the ultimate source of knowledge. I mean, I don't know. Is there any hint I can throw?
Nope.
Okay,
Nope.
they say no.
Leave it at that.
All right, marketing says no.
Just the dictionary. Just know everything.
Just imagine we're literally going to give you everything.
Stay tuned.
How much protein should I eat a day? I mean, your general rule is going to be like a gram per pound of body weight. How bodybuilders should deal with high uric acid? I mean, drink a lot of water.
There's some research on betaine as well.
Betaine might help with uric acids, yeah, as well. What's the minimum amount of carbs around a workout to maintain glycogen? I mean, there's studies that show you can have no carbs and maintain glycogen because your body can make them. But, you know, probably 25, 30 grams pre-post workout. When T3 is high, would it be better dieting on high carbs or a low carb diet better? I think what affects T3 is calorie deficit by itself. Everyone says that low carbs hurt T3. I don't think that's the case. Okay, any pointers for reactive hypoglycemia? Basically, that what Zonander is saying, reactive hypoglycemia is when you eat high carbs and basically your glucose goes up and then it drops. Why does that happen? Glucose goes up really high, therefore insulin goes up really high, and it pulls down your glucose levels, and what happens? You get the shakes. There are a couple ways that you can counter that, but one is don't eat high glycemic carbs. Eat low glycemic carbs with more fiber in it. That will slow the digestive response. You could also have things like, actually...
That's proteins.
Yeah, proteins, fats will slow digestion. So those are probably my top advice.
You could also do something like cinnamon.
Cinnamon.
Alpha-lipoic acid.
Cinnamon, alpha-lipoic acid are both good things you could do. Allison says, 7 weeks at true keto, 80% plus fat. I've not experienced any increase / maintenance of strength. Write it out or increase carbs around my workout. I want to deadlift 215 again. See, Allison, basically, first off, my advice would be is that now you're in keto, 80% is great. Now that you're keto adapted, Allison, I'd recommend two things. Either one, lower that down to 70% fat, and I think you'll start seeing your strength increase because your protein's going to get higher. So make your protein like 30%, 35% of your diet, you'll start seeing gains. Then maybe twice a week, go back up to 80% fat to maintain those high adaptations. You start seeing strength skyrocket. In fact, like even with myself, protein cycling on ketogenic diets really upped my muscle mass and strength. So I definitely would recommend that. Good question. What do you think? 2 or 3 more questions?
Yeah.
2 more? Okay. Can whey protein affect keto after training? I wouldn't worry about it. What's your PhD in? Skeletal muscle physiology. Brain function on keto? I think once you're adapted, it improves it. Can ketogenic diets help with neurological conditions such as MS, ALS? Yeah, there is actually data to support that. Would a ketogenic diet be effective for a hard gainer trying to gain mass? Possibly. If you're a hard gainer, I think usually hard gainers are very insulin sensitive. You could use carbs or keto and be just fine. Choose what diet you like best. More daily intermittent fasting make you more keto adapted? Yes. How much carbs really for keto according to you? It's all individualized, but for a safe bet, 5 to 10% or under of your diet. I weigh 216, but my goal is to weigh 150 pounds. Any tips? I mean, interval training, you know, everything we just said about satiety, basically. Maybe try a ketogenic diet. 2 more?
Cyclic diet.
All right, 2 more questions. Cycle your calories too. Justin Pekka says, "What's up?" Hey man, Justin's actually a good friend of mine. He actually coaches at University of Tampa basketball. We used to work together with the basketball team. They gained a lot of mass that time. I think the basketball team gained more mass in the history of any basketball team in the history of basketball players. And the thing is, we use accommodating resistance, which is like band resistance with them, and they gained a lot of muscle. Okay, so give examples of cycling. This will be my last question. Oh, someone goes, C9 time. Do you offer internships? Yes. Contact what?
Yeah.
But do you want to say? Do you want me to say? Isn't there an internship email?
Currently it's mine.
Okay. Do you want me to say it?
Is this on Facebook or Instagram?
It's on both.
Just say it back longer.
Okay. Can I type it in?
Let me just say it.
You can type into it.
Okay.
You open a Word?
Andy's gonna type it in as A.Barninger at theaspi.com. A.Barninger at theaspi.com for internships at ASPI. So that's B-A-R N-I-N G-E-R at theaspi.com if you're interested in internships, and he posted it on Facebook as well. I missed it. I was talking about another question about protein cycling. Let me go back to that. You're the best, Justin. Give examples of cycling. This Get Chimpy says, give examples of cycling protein. On higher days, more protein. Yeah, Get Chimpy. I think there's data from Tipton that suggests that when you up your protein really high, it can be anabolic, but then eventually your body gets used to it. So whether you're on a low-fat diet or a ketogenic diet, cycling protein can be very anabolic because you don't get used to those high surges of protein. So my suggestion is probably about you could basically 2 or 3 times a week up your protein. So say your normal protein's like a gram per pound of body weight. Maybe 2 days a week you up it to 1.5. You know, yeah, make it and keep your and maybe 1 day a week lower to 0.8 grams per pound.